So we're going back on stage again. We're going to be live in the Cork Opera House on March 30th for a very special event, which is going to form part of the Cork Podcast Festival. Our show is called Look Who's Talking. It's going to be all about those criminals. How do we get them into studio? How do we get up close and personal with them? And what have they got to say when the cameras are off? So Cork Opera House, tickets from corkpodcastfestival.ie, 30th of March. See you there.
So, Robin, the opening evidence has been heard in the case of the MV Matthew, which we will all remember that massive shipment of cocaine that was seized off the coast of Ireland, over 2,250 kilos of the drug. And we heard intriguing evidence of how these really large-scale professional drug operations work, and also the very interesting bit about it all, how all roads, well, I don't know if you can say roads with ships, but all voyage avenues lead back to Dubai. Tell us about the two guys that are on trial.
So 7 men in total were charged part in the investigation. 5 have pleaded guilty to different offences, and the 2 who have taken a trial and are contesting the charges are Harold Estuesta. He's a 31-year-old man from the Philippines. And the second accused is Saeed Hassani, a 39-year-old Iranian national. Both of them are accused of 2 charges of possessing cocaine for the purpose of their supply, both in Irish terrestrial waters and outside terrestrial waters. And the third charge they're both facing is participating in the activities of an organised crime gang. And that all relates to that seizure of the 2.2 tonnes of cocaine.
Yeah, so if we go back to that, I mean, it was September last year, September 2023. And, you know, what happened was, it was obviously there was intelligence. We've heard that intelligence played a role, but there was a confusing kind of a second ship involved. And how did it all really come about, that seizure? Just to go back to that bit of it.
Yes, there was obviously lengthy evidence heard over the last 2 days. So to try and condense that in some way, Gardaí received intelligence themselves on the 17th of September 2023 about the maritime importation of controlled drugs using a trawler. They liaised with the Customs Service, and they had their own intelligence that a fishing vessel was to be used in the Castletown Bay area of Cork to import drugs. So a joint task force was set up between the Guards, Revenue and the Defence Forces that culminated in intelligence being put in place on that port around Castletown Bay. A trawler identified as the Castlemore was purchased. Interestingly, as you said, everything leads back to Dubai. Over €300,000 was used to pay for that boat from Dubai. 2 men bought that. They set sail out off the south coast. In the meantime, there was more intelligence coming in about the MV Matthew, this kind of larger cargo vessel, the mothership, which culminated was the main vessel carrying that cocaine across the Atlantic. And essentially, Gardaí put an operation in place with the Defence Forces, put surveillance on the 2 ships. And it was a bit of a haphazard operation because the Castlemore, which was meant to, I think the terminology used is daughter ship, it was meant to take the drugs from the MV Matthew, bring them into Ireland, and presumably, I don't think it was destined for Ireland, the drugs, but certainly a market in Europe. That ran aground on the 24th of September. The 2 crew members had to be rescued, and the MV Matthew continued sailing around Ireland kind of aimlessly for a couple more hours, was subsequently intercepted by the Army Ranger Wing, and that 2.2 shipment was ultimately seized.
So, you know, it all kind of went wrong as these things seem to come to light sometimes. So the state's case really against these 2 guys is that they were crewmen, and they were part of what's described as a highly professional drug trafficking operation. So we heard some evidence against them, including the state's case that they participated in once they became aware that there was, that the authorities were onto them. There was some incredible evidence about how they delayed coming into port, and also even they are accused of attempting to set fire to the, which a massive amount of cocaine which had been placed in a lifeboat, and even also that they may have attempted to find another route or find another way to get the drugs off the ship.
Yeah, there's a large volume of evidence, and that mainly comes down to mobile phone communications, which will have to be proven as evidence in the case. But the crux of the state's case is that both men were willing and eager participants in this enterprise from the very word go. They got on the ship in Curaçao, just off the Venezuelan coast. The ship, the MV Matthew, set sail. While at sea, the cocaine was transported onto the boat. Now, the 2 men Mr. Estuesta and Mr. Asani say they were unaware of what was on it, that they were, simply there to crew the ship and had no ulterior motives. The state's case contradicts that. They say the evidence shows they knew exactly what was on.
Because there is some evidence about guys putting the cocaine on with guns and everything like that.
Yeah, that was in the voluntary statements of Harold Estuesta that, these men in boats with guns, long guns, he said, came along, put the cocaine on. He thought it was just contraband, but he didn't think any more of it. But the evidence will show in the case that there was text message on his phone making reference to "we will be rich," which certainly goes against him not knowing exactly what was in the cargo.
And amazingly, some of this evidence is it coming just from a WhatsApp conversation where they had, what was it called? Some sort of deck officers group chat.
Deck officers WhatsApp group. Yeah, that seems to be the main part of the evidence, is that there was 4 or 5 officers and the captain as well. But these officers had their own WhatsApp channel called the Deck Officers WhatsApp group, and they communicated through that.
Yeah.
And that's where everything was being run. Effectively, they discussed, how to extract the cocaine once they landed off the Irish coast onto the daughter ship. Then when things started going haywire, they discussed other alternative routes. They discussed getting away. There's one reference made in Harold Estuesta's communications of going full speed to Sierra Leone. So that was a plan C or plan B, if that would have worked out now. I'm not too sure.
Yeah, because there was discussion of, they were in Irish waters, I suppose, when the daughter ship ran aground. And then they seem to have considered going into international waters, or they did go into international waters, but were still able to be intercepted legally, is it? And
it's an interesting. Learned a lot about
maritime law that you didn't know you needed to know.
Didn't think I'd ever need to know.
Oh.
But there's a contiguous zone, which is up to 24 nautical miles outside the Irish territorial waters,
right?
And basically, the Irish Naval Service can intercept a foreign vessel if they believe it's infringing on immigration or customs laws. The term is called hot pursuit. Now, I thought the prosecuting counsel, Sean Gearin, was using colourful language, but it's actually a
technical term.
Yeah, it's a legal term under UN law that the host country or the country can try, intercept and pursue a foreign vessel if needs be in that contiguous zone. So that was certainly an option that was used, but eventually the MV Matthew didn't make that far anyway, and the Army Ranger Wing managed to intercept it and make their way onto the boat.
And when they did get on, then they discovered, I think, the cocaine then be moved into a lifeboat, was it? Presumably with the possibility of that being taken away from the boat. But they'd attempted to set it alight, had they, and get rid of the cocaine that way.
Yeah, so the evidence from the communication shows that it was put in the lifeboat, but they were still hoping to get away and make haste to Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case. I think there's it was heard today, there's literally pictures on one of the phones of the Army Ranger Wing abseiling down.
Yeah.
They know the gig's up and they try to set fire to 2.2 tons of cocaine in that boat. And what's also interesting is there's evidence against Harold Estuesta that while he was in radio communications with the Naval Service saying, please don't shoot, we'll comply.
Yeah.
He's literally heard in the same radio call talking to his crew members saying, burn the cocaine, get the gasoline out, we need more. So there's a large amount of evidence, which the state will say is evident of him being centrally involved in playing a leadership role in trying to conceal the cocaine.
So, I mean, we also heard they're in communication, obviously, with the Irish authorities as they're told to stand down or not move. Are they also in communication with, I suppose, their paymasters in Dubai or whoever is directing this operation off the ship?
Yeah, there's 2 men they've been referred to as Captain Noah and Captain Mansour. And the state say that these 2 men were effectively the controlling minds of the operation.
Yeah.
And they're in constant contact, the evidence shows, with the crew members in particular, Mr. Estuesta and Mr. Asani, giving directions, giving advice. And the 2 men will say that they were in fear, that they were afraid of people on the ship, but the state are saying that evidence shows that they were actually, if not of equal standing, certainly of equal status in those communications. They were bouncing ideas off each other. They're agreeing with certain things, disagreeing with certain things, giving their own opinions on how matters should proceed once the Castlemore were on the ground and once they were about to be intercepted. So it's not, as it seems, the prosecution say anyway, that they were just unwilling participants. They're certainly eager to participate.
And do we know anything about those 2? Is that being communicated on WhatsApp again, is it? Or is it?
Again, WhatsApp. There's 2 communication channels now, Signal and WhatsApp. But I think in relation to that, it's just purely WhatsApp conversations. I think the Captain Mansour phone was registered in India, if I recall it correctly. But certainly all indications are that, and the state has said it, Sean Gearin, the senior counsel, said it, that the entirety of the operation was being controlled from Dubai.
Yeah, so let's go back to the history of the MV Matthew. It's obviously it's I think it was called, is it Hammond or something like that originally?
Yeah.
So what do we know about that history of that boat? It's a regular sort of transport boat, is it? I think it was mentioned grain or something like that.
Yeah, it was originally built, we don't have the exact year, but to transport grain. It's 190 meters long, 32 meters wide.
Which is a huge vessel. Like.
It's a fair size. And we don't know much about its history up to August 2023, but that month it was bought. It underwent new ownership. It was renamed the MV Matthew.
Yeah.
It flew under the flag of Panama, but was registered in Dubai to a company called Symphony Marine.
Yeah.
And essentially, efforts were underway that month to recrew it.
Yeah.
There's been voluntary statements heard from the two accused that they were, I think Harold Estuesta said he applied for 500 jobs, was having no luck, and then somebody in Dubai took a shine to him. So they loved the CV, glowing recommendations, and they offered him $4,000 a month to come work for them. And he said himself he's surprised at the offer. He thought he's working for a wealthy company. So obviously what he's being offered was above market value for the role he was set to take.
Yeah, I mean, and I remember even when after the MV Matthew was discovered, like there was a sort of a shiny website, isn't there, with the Symphony Marine, so it all looks quite legitimate, and it's not. It's obviously just given the nature of the whole operation, it's anything but an unprofessional thing. So I mean. So we don't know, though, we haven't heard details about who the ownership structures or anything like that from Dubai. Of course, it's always, nothing in Dubai is registered in the way it will be here.
Yeah, it's all cloak and daggers. There's no great details, only the opening speeches we've heard so far. They'll get into that, I'm sure, at some stage, but certainly the ownership of the boat is registered in Dubai. The Castlemore vessel was bought by electronic transfer from Dubai. The directions were given to the crew members from these controlling minds from Dubai. So everything is pointing back to Dubai. Yeah, which we could say a lot of our stories include that line somewhere along the way. So obviously we've had other people who've come before the courts. 5 of them have pleaded guilty already to similar charges. What are the case, Mr. These two men, Estepoa and Hassani, are making? Are they suggesting they're suggesting that they didn't fully know what was going on and they were effectively coerced into going along with it? That's what it seems to be now, because we've only had opening speeches. We haven't heard any kind of defence arguments or defence cross-examination. But from the voluntary statements they gave, so when they were all 21 crew members were taken off the boat, they were spoken to by immigration officials, gave voluntary statements. And slowly, Gardaí kind of realised who was actually involved and who was just simply innocent. And there were 15 other people on the boat, and the state are saying that not everyone on the boat is guilty of an offence, but certainly that select few who were in the WhatsApp group who knew exactly what was going on, they were, the state say, guilty. So from the voluntary statement of Harold Estuesta, what was his title? He was he was a second officer, and he was involved in navigation, or qualified in navigation at least. So he says that this opportunity came up in Dubai. He was flown business class from Manila, where he lived, to Dubai, and then later flown out to Caracas, the Venezuelan capital, and then on to Curacao. And he simply said that he was surprised that the role he was given a promotion effectively on the boat. His role was changed from health and safety officer to working in the captain's quarters in communications. He says that when that cocaine transfer was happening at the high seas near Curacao, he didn't really know what contraband was there. It looked suspicious, but he didn't want to think about it. But he also admitted that he did help transport that cargo onto the boat with a crane. So his case, we expect to hear, if it's anything to go by his voluntary statements, that he was simply a unwilling participant in the whole thing and under threat. And Mr. Hassani, but he was a more senior officer again, was he? They're both of the same level, or give or take maybe a stage or two above or below, but they're both in that WhatsApp group. They're both communicating with people on the outside, and the prosecution is saying that they both went to significant levels to, I suppose, first of all, take part in the cocaine conspiracy. Secondly, to make alternative arrangements when the Castlemore ran aground. And thirdly, to, I suppose, flee and conceal the cocaine trafficking enterprise. And where Mr. Hassani's from Iran, did we hear background on his career as well in the same way? Not as much detail and certainly not as much background on him. We know he has family because he said in his voluntary statements that he was afraid of people on the boat, that they'd hurt his wife and family. The state obviously don't agree with that and say he was involved with his own volition. And again, he would have been trained in some kind of, I'm not exactly sure of the role, some kind of officer role anyway on the ship. He was offered a 6-month job in Dubai. I think a friend in Iran told him of the opportunity. It was too good to be true. He travelled to Dubai, was part of these meetings, was flown to Curacao, got on the boat, and again, he's expected to say that he knew nothing of what was happening.
And we didn't, in terms of the financial rewards, is the state making a case about how much they were to be paid for their role in this operation, or is that evidence not?
No, they haven't got into that, and they probably won't if they haven't mentioned it in the speech. The men have said themselves they're to be paid $4,000 and $4,500 per month for the wage, and both of them have kind of said in their voluntary statements that it's more than you'd normally earn. So, but in relation to extra funds or how much more they were to be paid, I think the only evidence that's been given is in relation to the captain. His name I'm going to mispronounce. Solly Chauvet. We'll go for that. When he had to be medically evacuated from the MV Matthew on the 25th of September. There's also doubts if he actually was injured or not. But when he was eventually detained at Waterford University Hospital, he had a number of satellite phones, 3 mobile phones, and he had just under $70,000 in cash. So it shows how much was in it for the captain. And given that he was excluded from certain communications, you'd have to imagine that the officers maybe could have possibly been on more money, could have been on slightly less, but they would be in the ballpark figure of taking part in that voyage.
And why was he medically evacuated? Because this was always the confusing bit. And what actually happened with the daughter vessel? Like, it just ran aground simply. Was it bad weather even, or was it?
There was definitely bad weather because the evidence given today that Gardaí couldn't even access the boat initially. And
I do remember that. They were.
There's I think 4 or 5 metre high swells. But in relation, and sorry, the Cosmo ran aground because I think the indications were, even when the men were purchasing the boat, that they weren't exactly avid seagoers, that they weren't too experienced in what they were doing. In relation to the captain of the MV Matthew, there were text messages recovered from him as well. And he seems to have been dissatisfied with how the operation was going. After the Cosmo ran aground, he was aggrieved with what was happening. He was kind of worried about his own exposure, being the captain of a boat carrying 2.2 tons with no exit strategy.
What would be worth worrying about.
And so he seems to, or claimed to have fallen down the stairs of the ship, had to be medically evacuated, and then he got out of Dodge, so to speak, but obviously didn't end there from, because he has since pleaded guilty to possession. But that's the backstory to him, essentially feigning injury to get off the boat.
It's always amazing with these. I mean, was it 150 million is the final figure, the value of the cocaine? There's always seems to be a bit of Keystone. Well, Keystone cops is probably the wrong term, but there always seems to be something.
Keystone criminals
going on with these things. But we did hear actually as well, and I think there was some video released at the time of how so it's a joint operation between the guards, the customs officials, and the Army Ranger Wing about them storming onto the ship, which was, abseiling down the side and all. I mean, it's, an incredible operation. Did they have details of that as well?
They've had some details of that. So there's obviously warning shots fired initially by the Naval Service. There's also other interesting evidence given about, Harold Estuesta in particular, speaking to the Navy Service saying, please don't fire on us, we've wife, we've kids, which the prosecution is saying was all just a diversion tactic to try get away from the Navy Service. But there was one of the men on board actually took a picture from the ship of the moment the Army Ranger Wing were abseiling down, so it's pretty interesting. We've obviously seen footage of it happen anyway, but
I think we have, we did at the time.
To see it from the accused or the criminal's perspective, certainly interesting, and at that stage they kind of knew the gig was up. And there's also evidence given about Harold Estuesta. The state will say, and will be argued no doubt, that he was effectively in control of the ship at that time, that he was engaging in evasive manoeuvres, which made it extremely dangerous for not just the Navy Service, but the Army Ranger Wing abseiling down. So
they were still, up until the point at which they actually boarded, they still weren't sure that they were going to just allow them to board effectively.
Exactly, and sure, they wouldn't have known either. They weren't in the end, but they wouldn't have known if they were armed with firearms either. So it's certainly they have to be commended, the Army Ranger Wing, for those dangerous conditions, doing it in the first place, abseiling down, but in those dangerous conditions, evasive manoeuvres by this massive cargo ship, for doing it safely and successfully.
So, I mean, it's not in dispute, obviously, that that amount of cocaine was on it. like we've obviously done many stories about how cocaine gets into Ireland, and we've heard of it goes for everything from the Michaela McCullum type of smugglers bringing a bit in the suitcase to we've had planes, we've had all of this, but this is obviously the biggest route of container ships really coming from South America across the Atlantic and landing in Ireland or otherwhere in Europe with major loads of this type. Did we hear if this, like as you said, it's where it was going to end up? I think one of the Sean Guerin, the state's barrister, says is immaterial. But did we hear details of where it was going to go, or you spoke about it might have been destined for? I think people always say these things are destined to be split between lots of criminal organisations. Yeah,
no doubt. 157 million it would have been split between a few different gangs. No, the immaterial thing was in relation to the charge.
Okay.
The intent was to land it in Ireland.
Okay.
Whether it was to stay in Ireland or not, which probably is immaterial in that sense.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence given.
Yeah.
And they mightn't even be conclusively sure where it was meant to end up.
Yeah. Yeah. And the fact that they're seized in international waters, that's not an impediment either, is it? The fact that it had been in Irish waters allows to be charged with those offences.
Yeah, that's why it's interesting. There's two of the same charges, but different in a way. So both men who are on trial at the moment are charged with possession of cocaine for the purpose of supply under Section 15A. But one of those charges in relation to inside Irish territorial waters, the MV Matthew, and the other charge in relation to being outside Irish territorial waters in that contagion zone. So that's the only kind of slight difference, where one's slightly outside, but obviously they can still charge and prosecute, even though they weren't specifically in Irish waters for a period of time while they had the cocaine.
So this is all being held in front of the Special Criminal Court and non-jury. Do we know how long it'll go on? And I presume there'll be a lot of technical evidence ultimately, I think, in these sort of trials.
So it was initially earmarked for 4 months, but that was obviously when the other co-accused were still due to stand trial. That'll obviously be reduced significantly, but it'll still go on for several weeks. And today an expert witness began giving evidence about navigational systems.
Right. Okay.
Harold West is accused of spoofing the navigations of the boat to hide their journey. And that evidence alone is expected to go on for at least 3 days.
Right.
It's only in relation to navigation. So if that's an indication of how long a small part of it will take, you can imagine how long the trial will actually go on for.
Because once you get into these cases, they can get very technical in just that sort of chain of evidence. Obviously, the spoofing bit is that they kind of disguised their route, basically, wasn't it? And
so the route they took was from Curaçao across the Atlantic, up northwestern Africa, around the Canary Islands, up the Portuguese coast, and then the Irish Sea.
Yeah.
The state are saying that, in particular, Harold Estuesta was involved in this spoofing, which is a dissimulation of the route.
So that's actually the technical term as well, is it? Spoofing?
Spoofing is actually technical.
Is it good?
Right. New terms coming out today.
Little did I know, I've been saying that for many years.
Different context.
Yeah.
But certain people, like the ship's owner, law enforcement, can track the ship if they want to stop that happening, given what was on board. This spoofing was carried out. And again, in another indication of the strength of the evidence against Estuesta, there was communications that he downloaded, a PDF file or a file to help in that spoofing, essentially. And that's on his phone. And that's still has to be proven, but that's another key part of the case against him. Okay, well, we keep coming back to it, Robin. It's an incredible story. And when you think about that sheer volume of cocaine, I mean, it's a massive amount. I don't know exactly what the amount of seizures in Europe wide, but it must be, even that would be a significant proportion of an annual seizure, I think, even Europe wide, That's up there. Like, there have been several other maritime seizures around that figure, maybe slightly higher, but it's certainly up there, and it shows that, Gardaí, the Defence Force and Revenue are at the table with these big European law enforcement agencies, and certainly playing their part in stopping cocaine coming into, if not Ireland on this occasion, to be used for the Irish market and definitely for the European market.
Yeah, and you see the level of international cooperation has never been higher, I would imagine. Well, thanks, Robin, and we'll come back to it again as the evidence gets a bit less technical.
Thank you, Niall.
Thanks very much. Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.